you happy to switch seats, or shall we? Is that all right?
why I've come to starting to work in this way. So Soap Theatre originated as a company that made visual puppetry for, for anyone at first, but we very sort of soon segued into making work for children and their families. Now, visual theatre means that it's theatre which doesn't start with a text, and it's devised. So the company come into the space and they create the work in the space, and then maybe by the night before the show opens, we might have a script. And it all comes out of visual arts. So I trained as a set and costume designer, and the starting point is often maybe a puppet or some material or textures and colours, and then the story will build in that way. So we work in a very unusual way. So we make theatre. We also we do these big engagement programmes. So when we make a project, we also like to involve our audiences in the creation of the show. So we'll work in schools, or we might set up groups ourselves, or we might partner with a charity, depending on the project, and deliver workshops and work with children and young people and their families to dive into the themes of the show, perhaps explore some of the artistic media that we're using. So we might do puppetry with the young people, we might do design sessions where they can learn how to do their own set design. It just depends on the needs of the show. And we also do that so that we can try and make links with groups of people who might not necessarily get to engage with the arts. So especially in schools, that can be really great. The theatre. Well, quite often I'll go into a classroom and I'll say, "Who's been to the theatre before?" And there'll be like 2 people, and my eyes will fall out of my head and I'll be really shocked. But it's true, not everyone goes to the theatre. So it's really lovely to be able to sort of share my work with people that don't necessarily get to do that. Fun. We work in, I'm just going to show you a few images from shows. So this was the first big tour that we did, the Young Pussycats Treasury of Nonsense. That's me with loads of hair over there, looking really young. The Snow Baby, this is actually touring this this Christmas. I'm going to be performing this at Western-super-Mare. This is my solo show, which this show I developed over probably about 5 years. Actually, it used to be a tiny show that I would perform in the back of a van at festivals, and then it slowly kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's a studio show for theatres. And then this was one of the last shows I made before the pandemic hit. So this is sort of the beginning of the story of how Minny Stynker came about. So in 2019, I became pregnant, and I decided in my infinite wisdom that I was going to try and do as much work as possible before the baby came. So I ended up making 3 shows that year, which is obviously really, really stupid in hindsight. One of them was Matilda, which was a show I made with my mum. This is my mum here. She came up with this really interesting 2-headed girl character in some of her paintings. My mum's name is Simone Cuthbert, for those of you at home, and she's a fine artist. And we decided to make a show together, and it was quite exciting because it was a multi-generational show. So it was me and my mum performing in it, but we also wanted to have a community aspect to the project. So we drew together the Soap community choir. So it was a big choir of people from the community that supported the show and sang when we opened at Western Museum. And it was one of the first times that I started to really engage with the community and do more meaningful projects within the community rather than just the odd kind of puppet making workshop. So we did this and made another show for Christmas, and then fast forward to 2020 and I had my baby. So this was the beginning really of the idea of Minny Stynker, but it's also a personal story as well. So 1 month before the first lockdown, my son Elvin was born. Now, he was unwell for the first month of his life. He's completely fine now, but we were in Bristol neonatal intensive care for 4 weeks. He had meconium aspiration syndrome, and we were living in the Cots for Tots house. So for those of you that don't know, that's some accommodation that parents who need to be very close to the hospital can stay in if their children are very, very ill and need to be able to get into the hospital very quickly. So we were staying there, and while we were there, we met many other families who had sick children, obviously, and we were looked after really well there. Now, Elvin recovered, and 2 days before lockdown hit, we were spat out with this little baby who'd been very poorly, and then obviously lockdown happened, so we were on our own with Elvin, for quite a few months. The reason I got one of these pictures is because you can see in my husband's hand here the Julia Donaldson book, which all of the beds that all the children had, we were given a Julia Donaldson book. And this kind of sank into my brain a little bit as reading stories to Elvin. It was very encouraged by the nurses, and sharing stories with our children. That really kind of sunk into my mind, even for babies, like hearing the mother's voice, and that was very important. And these stories became quite kind of important to us as a family. So, moving on. So, this is where we used to live. This is our house in Mill West. Now, after I kind of got over the whole having a newborn thing and just being like alone in this strange new world, I had to start to navigate how I was going to continue my work in this world that we were in, where we couldn't go to the theatre anymore. And how was I going to be able to share my work and engage audiences and create beautiful things when we couldn't meet them and we couldn't be in spaces together. And also, I have a tiny baby, so how are these things going to be possible? And I began to think about local connections, how to sort of reach out to different organisations and try and discover a new way of working for myself. Norwest Media Centre is just around the corner, and they champion creative technologies within that area. And I don't remember how I got recommended to speak to Sharon Clark from Raucous, but somebody told me to talk to her. She runs a theatre company and they work with creative technologies, and I had a Zoom meeting with her, and it started to get my brain going, like how can I use this kind of digital format to be able to create an experience which is very intimate, still has that lovely human-to-human connection that we have in theatre, but also it can happen remotely, or it can be something that people can engage with in their own little device in their pocket. How can I sort of share those lovely things that I think are really important, which are really immediate and aren't about screens? How can I combine those two things to maybe create something interesting? So that was all filtering away in my brain. Pervasive Media Studio, she works there too. So that was another thing that popped into my brain and kind of filtered down for later. So the same year, 2020, I think my son's probably about 11 months old, but it's quite 10 months old, I decided to do a master's in illustration. So, start to get a sense of the kind of person I am through this talk. So I enrolled at Falmouth University. I did an online master's, and I began to explore some interesting stories that have always been in my mind. One of them was Minny Stynker. This is one of the little bits of illustration that I did while on the course. Now, while I was working on the course, because it's obviously it's an academic course, they really get us to be very rigorous and think about why we're making the work we're making and what do we want to do and how we're going to innovate. And all of those conversations I had earlier in the year about digital technologies sort of were still there and kind of like mushing around in my brain. So I decided for one of my projects to imagine a picture book with this story that I created as an augmented reality experience. I didn't know what that would look like, but I loved the idea that people who couldn't get into the theatre would still be able to share a story, open a book, see beautiful artwork, also get some of those forms that we get when we go to the theatre, hear voice actors, hear beautiful music, see lovely things moving. So I thought this could be a really good way of combining these different forms that I really love and presenting something, delivering something a bit different. And in particular, going back to my experience in hospital, I wanted to create something for families who are caring for children with long-term health conditions. So people that wanted to have lovely experiences with their children, but couldn't go to the theatre. Maybe their kids had compromising immune systems and they couldn't mix with other children perhaps, but they still wanted to have these shared experiences. So for one of my projects, I made this little trailer, which I'm going to show you now. I taught myself how to animate on an amazing program called Procreate. So this is all just homemade. Where is it? Do I just press enter?
Yeah.
Go on, show me, you did it. Sorry, you. There we go. So let's just get rid of that and go back here. So that was really, I made it not knowing what it would end up like. I hadn't finished the book, but this was just something which, it was a trailer of something which didn't exist, basically, and what I hoped it would feel like the thing that when it eventually got made would be like. And I gave this trailer to Bridgwater University. So I can't actually, because I was completely sleep deprived at this time, knowing the story properly, I forget chunks. But somebody told me I needed to get in touch with Coral Mountain, so I did. And she runs the creative computing course at Bridgwater. And I took this trailer to her and I said, I want to work with your students and just try and pilot this idea. I've got some pages of the book. I want to know what can AR do? I don't really know. Like, I've tried a few things online. I haven't really found anything that's magical and gorgeous. But I have a feeling that it's possible. So, and she was like, yeah, brilliant, let's do it. So I worked with some students and they created some stuff for me. And it wasn't perfect, but it was interesting. So we had, these are just a few little kind of screenshots from what we made. In the book, there's a scene where they go into a forest, a magical forest, and so they created this forest that when you put your phone over a picture of a tree, all these kind of digital trees will spring out of the table and move around, and they created Minny Stynker that did a dance, and there was kind of bits of, we worked out how, we sort of thought maybe that the text could be written and then we'd hear it read, and just tried a few things out, and it was kind of, it was okay. Like, I quite liked it, but it didn't feel like it was immersive enough somehow, and it had too much of a digital kind of look to it. It didn't have that like lush storybook quality that I was looking for. So I decided to write an Arts Council bid and dive into this properly. The Bridgwater University were up for partnering again. They gave me a budget, and I did my usual thing of like going all over the place, pulling partners in, seeing who will work with me to make this really amazing. And I had a meeting with the digital producers at the Bristol Vic, just to talk to them about the project. And they mentioned Zubr VR, who I'd never heard of. I said, oh yeah, I'm working with Barspar. And they said, oh, well, we have, there was a woman called Amy who used to work for us at the Bristol Vic, and she's now working for this company. So you should definitely go and have a chat with her, because they make this kind of work and they've done something really cool for us at Bristol Vic. So I thought, well, I've already said I'm going to work with Barspar, but I might as well have a talk to them, because I probably won't be able to afford them. You know, they're professionals, and you know the students are probably going to be a bit cheaper. So I phoned them up and I had a meeting and I told them my budget, and they were like, yeah, we can do something for that. So I phoned up Barspar and told them I no longer needed their services. No, it wasn't quite like that, but yeah, I chatted to them and they understood that it would be better for the project to work with this amazing company. And so I met up with them, got the funding, and we began the project. And my brief is, yeah, so this is the next section of the talk, really, is the brief that I gave them. I hadn't finished the picture book. I had a selection of spreads, and I decided that for the pilot, I would give them 4 spreads of the picture book to bring to life. And I also wanted an app that was a creative experience that the kids could do. So it wasn't just a kind of consuming experience, it was something where they would be able to participate in a creative way. So there would be the picture book AR experience, and then the Bring Your Friend to Life app. Now, what that is a it's an app where you basically like draw a picture of a character, and then you scan it, and then you can place your character into augmented reality. So you can see your little character standing on the table, and then you can press buttons and make it dance around and stuff like that. It's really, really cool. It's really, really, really cool. I'll show you in a bit. But the amazing thing about this app is that you can use it in workshops and engagement stuff with kids. So it's not just like, here's an app, off you go. From having it, I created these series of workshops where I can go into schools and work with them for a good few hours, doing creative writing, discovering a character, and learning different illustration tools. And then finally they get their character and they scan it and see it come to life at the end of the workshop. It's really fun. So yeah, that was the brief, and that's what they gave me. These are just a few more images from the picture book. I've no idea what time it is. Have I been talking for an hour?
Yes, I think fine.
Okay, great. So yeah, these are the 4 images. This is the first page, and then the second page, the third page, and the 4th page. So the actual book is a 30-page book, but we thought that we'd divide it into chunks, and just for the pilot, work with these 4 pages. During the creative process, there were sort of, from my perspective, it's very different from Zubr's perspective, but from my perspective, I gave them the illustrations, and I needed to get the sound and the music and the voice work sort of right, I suppose, for this as well. So that was kind of my job, and then their job was to animate it, make it look amazing, do all the programming, and then put all of the stuff together. So bring my artwork and Tom's music and Noah's voice together to make it this gorgeous experience. So I used to work with my husband. He was our sound designer and composer, but he's now gardener. So I had to look for someone else. And I came across this amazing man that lives in Bristol called Tom Ball. And the music that you heard when you were coming in, he created that. And so that's the music that you'll hear when you have a little go with the app. And then the voice actor is a young man called Noah, who is a friend of my son. So he's not professional, but he should be, because he's really, really good. The nice link with him is that back in 2002, I used to work in a call centre with his mum, and we actually created Minny Stynker together. We were, not really working, pretending to answer calls and actually doodling and drawing. And we developed this character together, and so it was really nice that it sort of came full circle, and 20 years later her son did the voice for the book. And then once they had done all their amazing work, we started to test it on people. So the whole project culminated after doing workshops and developing the app and doing the R&D for the show as well. We did 2 weeks of rehearsal and created some material for the show. We presented all our findings at an exhibition at the Norwest Media Centre in Bristol. And there, all of the participants could come. They could see all of the amazing imaginary friends that all the children had designed over the last 3 months on the walls from, I don't know, probably about 6 different groups, 7 different groups, as well as online groups. We had the Bring Your Friend to Life activity in one corner, so people could like draw and colour in their characters and bring them to life, and then the picture book experience on the table in the middle. And it was really wonderful to see how people responded to it, and it'd be really nice to see what you think too when you have a go. It seems very user-friendly. People can just kind of pick it up and have a go, and it doesn't require, it's very simple, I guess, is what I'm saying. Simple and user-friendly, so children can just grab it and use it. But it's just amazingly magical and wonderful. So yeah, I'm very, very happy with it. Any questions at this stage? Any questions on YouTube?
Not so far, but don't forget there's always a slight delay with the stream. So, okay.
Can you tell us a bit more about the character of Minny Stynker? Who is she? What was she like?
I'm glad you asked that. Well, Minny Stynker, she is. So in the book, she is Kit's imaginary friend. I haven't really told you anything about the story at all, have I? The story of Minny Stynker is a child called Kit moves to a new town, and he is lonely and hasn't made any friends yet, and he's unpacking in his room, and a picture falls out of one of his books, and it's a picture of this like really cheeky, naughty-looking little girl, and it inspires him. He starts drawing and drawing her over and over again. He starts school, he finds it really tough, he feels lonely, it's always raining where he's moved to, it's raining. And then one night he falls asleep and then he wakes up and Minny Stynker's leapt off the page and she's kind of in the room with him and she takes him on adventures and they go on to all these different adventures, but eventually she realises that he's not making any real friends and so she disappears. And he kind of gets dropped back in the real world. And he's still lonely and he misses Minny and then the wind blows and blows open his bag and all these pictures of Minny like fly out everywhere and a little girl finds one and says, "Oh, this is amazing, we like drawing too, come back to our house and do some drawing with us." And so he goes back and meets her family and they all draw together and all the imaginary friends of all those children will leap off the page and then everyone flies up and have an adventure together. The end. So that's the story. But Minny Stynker herself, she's a character that's kind of evolved over. Basically, she's existed for about 20 years, and at first she was quite a surreal character and had a totally different story. But she slowly evolved to become this kind of shape-shifting sort of trickster in a way, but almost like someone. The kind of person that you want to be, like she's free and she's silly and she laughs and she doesn't care about the rules, and she can fly off to other universes and go on adventures whenever she wants. That's her. Any other questions?
How do you maintain focus? Because it feels like it's gone on for quite a long time. And if you've got a creative mind, the temptation is that, oh, I've got another idea. Oh,
that's a good question. I think it's just probably a character trait of mine that I have an obsessive quality to me. And also once an idea starts and things start happening and people start saying yes to you, like you get some funding and it starts happening and then you say, "Oh, would you like to work with me?" And they say yes, and it just gets more and more exciting and you don't want to put it down. I think that's really, and also it just feels like once once you've got this amazing thing and it's half finished, it just would be a crime not to finish it. And I want people to get to experience it. I mean, at the moment, we've only got, like a quarter of the book is done, but hopefully by May, it will all be finished. I'm going to be going to the BRI and working with kids on the ward, sharing the book and sharing the activities with them, as well as a whole bunch of schools. We're going to be touring libraries and doing pop-ups of the experience in libraries, and it's going to be amazing! So that's why. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, I was just wondering, have you had a chance to test it on children yet in a small group yet, and did you get any sort of, how was that research?
Yeah, well, we tested it. The book experience has been tested the least. So we did it here. We did it in this exhibition, and everyone loved it. I mean, we got a bit of feedback, and everyone's like, "Yeah, it's really great. It's really magical." But obviously, we'd like to do some more. Like I've done some sharings with sort of industry peers as well. I did one at the Pervasive Media Studio in Bristol a couple of weeks ago, and again had good feedback and also some really interesting ideas to sort of develop it, I suppose. One of which was there was a woman there who was partially sighted, and I always, because I make very visual work, I kind of assume that the partially sighted and blind community would be less interested in what I do. But she was actually really excited because it meant that because you've got the story kind of read to you and you've got the music, children are like, there might be siblings, one is partially sighted and one isn't, and they could share the book together, so they'd both be able to experience the story together. And I thought that was really interesting and something I'm definitely going to follow up on. Yeah. Anyone else? I've bombarded you horribly, so you can ask in a minute if you think of anything. Might be over to you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sure?
Yeah, I think
You've
I've
done?
talked enough, yeah.
Oh! You can never talk enough.
Do you want to swap places?
Yeah.
Right, let's do it.
Thank you.
Okay. How do I get out of here?
Oh, don't ask me. I'll just turn off the telly again.
Shall I leave it open or shall I just close it?
Just close it.
Okay.
I think we're done.
Right, so mine might be somewhere on the Finder, maybe?
That's your drive, yeah.
Oh yeah, interesting. Let's see. You. Cool. Right, so yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'll just go a little bit through Minny Stynker from Zubr's perspective, well, let's go a little bit into our curio as well, into what we do. I've got a few different projects to mention. And yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about storytelling in AI in general. So any questions in between, please just raise your hands. And also anyone online with questions in between, I'm more than happy to answer them as well as possible. Curio also worked on Hidden Station. We've got two of these illustration posters here today, so that's the other thing we will talk a little bit about.
Talk about these and we can use these today with
Yes.
your phones. If not, I've got a phone, we can have a go. These are up to life.
Yeah, and we also have a few other demos. So Tomasin brought Minny Stynker with her, and I've got a couple of different things to show as well. All right, let's dive in. So Minny Stynker, I think the next one may already be. Well, I did actually something I haven't shared with Tomasin yet. So I was filming at Pervasive Media Studio, and I was trying to be smart, and I made this interactive PDF with embedded videos, and it doesn't work out. So let me see if I can find it actually here, because I'd love to show you this trailer. Let's see if we can. Yeah, cool. All right, let's just put that on full screen. Just to have a little bit of a look as to how it looks like, and a little bit of the
I
nice
don't
music as
remember
well.
when the rain started, but it had been raining for what felt like forever.
Yeah, we've got some quite nice sound effects going on as well. All right, let's try go back into. Maybe let's see.
That is actually me laughing that's been pitched out.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. Okay. All right. So, Minny Stynker, from our perspective, yeah, Tomasin approached us, and I think it was Amy actually project managing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically an experience that, I mean, I love it because it's so accessible. I think it's quite a low key, as you know, we've got a few points on here. I'm going to try go through that, but I've also got a few notes. So let's see. The idea was to create something that is something that is not very much just technology, something that is very much kind of based on something material as well, a book, you know, or drawing, these kind of activities. So this interaction was very important for us to keep in mind. The whole application works on tablets, and as you already explained earlier, it's twofold. So you've got this experience with the picture book, and you've got the experience that is kind of like, you know, you can choose basically to bring your friend to life, so that sort of thing. And the reason why it works so well, not just on a visual, you know, it's not just a visual sort of aspect, it's just all these different sensations coming together, all these different senses in terms of also audio. And this is what we kind of tried to, you know, all these different things to bring them together. And I think it worked out really well, so I hope you can have a look later. Okay, going through this to the picture book or the storybook. What we did basically was Tomasin gave us those beautiful illustrations. So as you said, I think it was 4 pages to work with. And our graphics team took those pages and tried to identify which sort of characters could be animated, or which sort of different objects could move, or what sounds you would hear, I guess, as well. And that was kind of a collaborative process in terms of finding out what are these elements that can be brought to life with AR. So that's one thing, and there is also, with these animations, because it's basically classic animation that we do or that we have done in this project. We've got, for example, you know, with characters, it would be cutting out, you know, the head, the kind of like arms, and all sorts of things to make them move. But there is also so-called user interface or on-screen animation. So there could be rain coming across the screen as well. We did some brainstorming as to how we could expand the story, like making them kind of go to basically beyond the pages as well, which is really lovely, because I think that's one of these things that I would like to kind of talk about later as well, to in terms of what AR can do, basically. Yeah, and I mean, this classic animation is then brought into 3D space. I think that's the kind of major aspect to think of in terms of having those different animations, but there is some sort of parallax effect going on. So as you move, and I think that's the thing that happens so much when you have a tablet and you scan. So these images would be basically tracking images, as we call them. I will explain a few terms later. So the app will understand, okay, this is the image, and it will trigger something basically. And you can move around a little bit. Yeah, so that's that. And the other thing is with this create your own friend. I love that so much. I mean, in the video, sorry, but I had to put in my own thing that I've drawn actually in Norwest Media Sentiments. I love that so much. We've got these 4 different stencils that you can use, and kids can, choose whatever they would like to use in terms of the kind of shape, and the application would then recognize the shape, and you scan it, and it's basically like a cookie, like a stencil thing, and it cuts it out. And then you've got these different motions or movements that it can do, like flipping, dancing, and that sort of thing. And that's obviously expandable. So what we had to do is we had to identify strong features that we can do within a certain budget. That's the kind of thing in terms of how we approach that. There are a few more. Oh, that's mine. And also, you had a similar picture. So we've got basically, that was at Norwest, so the upper right, earlier this year, and then the below one is a testing session that we did with adults at Pervasive Media Studio, which was really lovely because we got a lot of really good feedback, really interesting development feedback as well in terms of what could be improved. Because there are always certain kind of elements within applications that could be smoother, or something that may sometimes work but sometimes not. So it's always good to have, and it's part of our process basically of saying we have a certain goal as to what we want to create, and then we test it, and then we amend and kind of do how we call it bug fixes and so on, obviously in development. All right. Well, that's kind of at the moment, I guess, a little bit of a summary for a not too technical summary for Minny Stynker. Any questions? Please let me know. I will continue with a little bit of storytelling and a few other projects. Also, if you have questions about Minny Stynker later, I mean, obviously I could go a little bit more into technical details, but I also know that we have quite a lot of artists and makers in our audience. So I would actually really like to focus a little bit on how we work with creatives via Zubr, in terms of how we collaborate, how we kind of support in the beginnings when we are looking for funding and so on. So things like that we can discuss in a bit as well. All right, so Curio. Curio is part of Zubr. We kind of did some subdivisioning a few years back because Zubr has got quite a lot of different things, or we do a lot of different things in terms of commercial projects, but also, and that's very much what I'm part of as well, culture and heritage. So Curio is very much about the arts and culture sector and how we cater to museums, libraries, galleries, art practitioners, and so on. If you want to know any more, I don't know, that's obviously quite small now, but we've got a QR code here that leads to our website. And please have a look at the website actually, because the thing is, as you mentioned earlier, Amy is our producer, main person for Curio Project, who's very good with any sort of funding applications and so on, and she regularly puts very, very thorough case studies onto the website, and they are mostly very generous in terms of kind of, I would say, explaining the processes of how we work and collaborate, and it explains kind of how just the different technologies we are using and so on, which is really nice. All right, that's just a few of my favorite projects that we've been working on in the last few years, where you can see a few different technologies. That's some of it is AR, some of it is VR. So obviously, I'm concentrating or focusing a little bit more on AR today. But we do a lot of virtual reality projects as well. The top left one is a project we've done with a band called Sculpting. So we sometimes work with musicians. And this was a so-called volumetric capture. It works with a camera that has got like a left and a right camera, more or less. And we shot that at Fabric at the club in London with a band, and this is a somebody they collaborated with, a singer called Grove, quite lovely person, and we've done actually a quite creative. This was a quite creative output in terms of using sort of like low points and having these like weird effects going on and so on, because the video itself was it was a full music video actually that we've done with them. The upper right one is really, really nice. We had a collaboration with the City Council in Ireland for a heritage project called Tide. It's a VR project, and what we've done in this case was we flew up there and we worked with actors, and we had a stereoscopic camera, but basically a camera set up with two very nice cameras, left and right eye, kind of simulating to shoot on a green screen. And I was lucky enough to edit all of that. It was really, really nice. So what it does basically, having these two cameras, is you have like a little bit of a difference between, basically a different angle, and you can then overlay it in. We are working mainly in Unity, which is the software we are using for VR and AR projects. And you can overlay it, and you get this sort of like effect as if people are a little bit like, actually like, you know, they have some volume, there is some sort of 3D going on, so it's not just a flat image. And it worked out really well. I mean, what I really like about this idea is that there are different techniques coming together. It's just basically a little bit of 3D modeling. So you've got like our 3D artist Joe, who would create a ship, and our developers would create so-called shaders, which kind of make the water surface and the reflections, and then you would have a so-called skybox, which is like the sky that is wrapped around. So it's lots of different stuff going on, and then you've got these characters. So yeah, this the lower one, the lower left one is, well, not really the greatest picture, but that was part of what we've done with Bristol Vic, where the project was called Window to the Past. Really nice project where we used a 3D scanned model of the Bristol Vic to simulate, I think, 3 different stages in history, in terms of having a little time wheel that you could spin, and then you could see these like different times, and there would be some Easter eggs. You know, it was a bit gamified as well, with being able to walk around and finding certain objects and listening to stories that are connected to the place. And just quickly, something I really, really liked is the lower right one. It was done with a Hong Kong-based artist called Simon Birch, a project called 14th Factory. He had a physical exhibition in LA and wanted to recreate parts of his artwork in VR, actually. So what we've done was we created a massively beautiful experience with basically parts of old aeroplanes, very specific planes, being kind of like within a pool of black water. It's very hard to explain really, but this is basically what you see as you sink into the water, and it would be expanded. So what we've done with that project was there would be this physical installation, but what we created with him was very much an idea of expanding the physical and going into dream world and having stories coming up and so on. Anyway, I could talk forever, but I'm going to continue now because this was meant to be just a short, just a short overview. Let's see. Right, that's cool. So, in terms of going to what we do in Curio and these different projects, I just wanted to go through a few basics, more or less, in the first place, because what is augmented reality anyway? What can we do with it? It's kind of like something that, I mean, this is just like different terms. It's not even very well categorized. It's just different ideas as to what we do. So, for example, revealing the past is something that we've done with Bristol Vic, for example, or I don't know, there was a project a while ago with Carrickfolk's Castle where we very much had, you know, a ruined castle, and we would kind of reconstruct how it looked like, and you would then have an animation that would reveal the interior as well. So you can very much do that. You can reveal the past, you can work with artifacts more or less, bring stories to life of any kind. I mean, that's what happens in general, but this is also very much what we've done with your story as well, and what we've done with Hidden Station, for example. Showing the future will be interesting for the first project I'm going to mention, where it's very much about what can happen. So this goes into the next few points as well, in terms of trying out new things or visualizing concepts, for example. I mean, trying out new things is very much a thing that is used in marketing as well. AR is very commonly used nowadays in, you know, I don't know, like IKEA, for example, has got, you can place your furniture in a room to try out how it looks like, that sort of thing. So it can go into that direction.
Or you can try lipstick on.
Yes, absolutely, or tattoos
I know,
even, you know, all sorts of things. So we've got all these different things, and also, you know, there's this like Google Translate tool where you can live scan foreign text and it translates it to your preferred language. Things like that. So, you know, there are lots of different applications, more or less. And, well, what I quite like is this whole point with demonstrating procedures for training. Medical training, for example. We work regularly with a company in Bristol called Limbs and Things, who make kind of very close to real life sort of looking, you know, body parts, more or less, to help medics train certain procedures. So sometimes we have very funny props lying around at Zubr, actually. I don't know if you've seen it last time when you visited.
I think I remember that, yeah.
We had very, very interesting things like that. I'm not going to go too much into now, but anyway, it's quite interesting because you basically have some sort of, basically like a tracker as well. A tracker would be basically an app recognizing a picture. And then as soon as this picture is recognized, it would understand how things are placed in space. And then you would have, for example, 3D models of something coming up. Or showing information, a very simple point to a certain degree. I mean, obviously you can have any sort of overlay on a screen or data visualization of any sort. But it's also, for example, used in something called improved situational awareness in the US Army for improving night sight and all sorts of things. So AR is used in all sorts of ways. Right, so a few keywords. Because there are so many things that I'm so used to saying, basically, but there are so many words that we don't really know, and I think it's probably like a vocabulary of, if you know like 20 words or something, it's already really helpful to understand, okay, that's that. So for example, agency and interaction. Agency or interaction is very much when you have an experience of some sort and the user, we as audience or user or experiencer, as we call it sometimes, can do something, can interact in a way, like by clicking things or by walking somewhere and activating things. So that's that, and there are various ways of interaction, basically. So that's something that we are always concerned with in terms of how much agency is there. Are we just listening to something? Is it linear, or is it interactive in terms of you being able to choose between different options, for example? Then we've got different tracking. So the word tracking comes up quite a lot. Plane tracking, for example, is something that we do to a certain degree with Minny Stynker as well, where you tap, you basically kind of like understand there is a surface. So I also have the word or the term phrase tap to place in here, where, and this happens a lot in AR, that something is placed somewhere. So you're basically telling the program where you want this content, this figure, for example, this character to appear. Yeah, what else? Spawning an object. I mean, it's kind of like how we say it when we use AR in terms of the user being able to let something appear more or less, things like that. And we've got things like GPS-based AR where it doesn't really work so much with us actually deciding, but it's like what we get with Pokemon Go, for example, where we've got the whole program being connected to GPS, so it kind of understands where we are, and we have certain things coming up in certain places. Artists use that before. I'm trying to think. David Trigley made something in London that is like a weird thing, obviously, that comes up like a worm or something that comes up in a very specific space. So it had been used before. It's very nice. Yeah, I mean, there are different other things. I mean, one thing that I would like to point out still is user interface and user experience. User interface is what we make in apps. It's basically everything that's on screen in terms of this is clickable, like start the experience, or any sort of options you can click, or close something, or any sort of thing that is on screen more or less. And user experience is very much what we are working on as well, and very much connected to that is the word choreography. User choreography is the whole thing. It's not just what happens within a digital experience, it's the whole thing as you stage it with how do people come into the building, have you got a group, how does the group feel, how do you facilitate, when do you give them a tablet or something, how are they eased into the experience? And that's very interesting for Raucous as well. It's quite interesting how they kind of start their experiences before the actual play begins, because it eases in very nicely. Where they, for example, work with, people gathering in a space before they actually start, maybe hearing music and so on. And all of this is a very psychological, kind of process. And into that very much feeds, obviously, the idea of how user-friendly is something. So user-friendliness basically means if I click something, does it work? Is it too awkward, or is it straightforward, and so on? And it's really interesting how you just need to test it. That's the only way of finding out, really, and listening. I think that's something really important. And this brings me to our first project, Future Places Toolkit, something I'm working on at the moment with a company called Uninvited Guests. So I'm trying to flick through a little bit because, I could say more, but Future Places Toolkit is something very much a community engagement, like a tool that is used for future planning for cities to involve neighborhoods to kind of reimagine their surrounding, because it's still very much an issue, more or less, to get people involved and to let them have a say. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, I would have a video, but I'm not going to go in there now. So let me just bring up my notes as well. So in terms of, Future Places is a public consultation tool, more or less. So we had funding from My World in the last few months via a scheme called Catalysts and Connectors, and we were working for about 6 months on a iteration of the prototype with them. So the idea is basically to go out with groups of people, local residents, maybe 10, maybe 15 people, and leading them through an area. So you see this little part of a plan. So we went to Philwood Broadway, for example, where they are trying to recreate some sort of area that is like a green space at the moment, but it used to be a market square. So it was actually quite busy, but at some point it was just completely, I don't know what happened actually. It's very interesting what happened in terms of now, there is nothing there really, and it's quite dead, and there is not much interaction there. People can't really dwell anywhere. It's all a bit lost, and obviously people want to change stuff there. So we went out with this group to test our Future Places toolkit. And the way it works is that people can walk around and they're being asked what they see, how they can imagine the future. And at the same time, we're working with an artist who is not on the location, but is, in this case, at the moment in our studio, and they are drawing in VR what they hear, what people are suggesting. Like when they say, "Oh, I would like lots of trees there. I would like a shop over there. Can you please make a climbing wall?" and stuff like that. It's really, really interesting, and it's very much real time. So it comes up very quickly, and people walk around with their funny selfie sticks and can see everything. Just like a portal, basically.
There's a live artist on the other side.
Yeah. Because the thing is,
Are they just there 24 hours?
absolutely. That's it. Yeah, sorry. So our partners are invited guests with Paul Clark, who's very much, they are very much interested in maintaining, because they're also a theatre company. They are very much interested in maintaining this human interaction aspect and kind of like interaction between people, and not letting technology taking over entirely, but having this sort of exchange. And we are very much interested in that as well. So I think what's very important for Zubr and for Curio in general is materiality of any sort. So that is very important for our project with you, in terms of having the book and having the drawing and having these different elements that come together. And seeing the phone or a tablet more like a means to see through and see something, and having some sort of a different view, or maybe a new view on something that is there, but not too much just seeing the phone as a phone, but having that as more like a portal, basically, as I said. Making a scene is something that we also done with Bristol Vic and with the theatre collection. I brought that today. I would really like to show you that. So I went to the theatre collection this morning to pick up their book, and this is a wonderful project. We worked with the theatre collection to digitize a whole play called Babes in the Woods, which is very, very nice. It's an old play, and they have a lot of original sketches of how these different characters were designed, how the costumes were designed. They have different little miniatures, I think, of the props and so on, and we tried to digitize all of that. So it was all very, very accurate. There was a lot of detail on, being very thorough with recreating and representing something in an authentic way. And what happens with this book, basically, as you see these young people on this one picture, it's a workshop-based experience for people to come together, very much young people, to learn about backstage roles in theatre. So they can go through pages, and I showed you that one actually a little bit. So you go through different pages. It's part of the book. So some of the book is analog, so you read through and you learn. And some of the pages are augmented, and you go through these different stages. Like, for example, in the beginning, you would choose different stage elements. Then you would choose different characters that you would put into the scene, and then you choose lighting and special effects like snow or whatever. And in the end, you assemble the stage and you see what you created, and you can scale it up and you can walk through. And it was lovely. I did some filming with this group months back, and they really enjoyed it. It's just amazing to see how nice it's being received, and how powerful it is. And the good thing is, in this case, it's also a bit of a strategic thing. So this whole app works with a budget. So you get a budget allocated. You have like 6K and you can spend it, but you have to be very careful with how. So it's a bit like, being a bit mindful about what you do. I would really like to show you that in a bit, because that's great. Unlocking the cage. Actually, I've got so many book things today, but it's just, I don't know. I mean, they are just all really good. So just briefly, Unlocking the Cage was done with Exeter Library, and it very much deals with the Cage, which is their collection of rare books, and it was made for International Women's Day, I think 2 years back or something, and it features 6 women writers and has audio narration and so on. And this book is kind of still touring different libraries, and you go through, and it's quite an interesting setup where, in this case, it's stationary AR, where there is basically I think a tablet mounted on top, and as you turn the pages, you would see how it comes to life, and there are different elements kind of moving, so that's really nice. And the last one, because this is kind of very connected to Hidden Station, before I start talking about Hidden Station, is Six Sisters. That was actually part of our proposal, and that was probably part of why we got selected, because so we've got the Six Sisters murals on North Street in Bristol, and it's a few really wonderful, very, very well-known mural artists who contributed there. So we had, for example, Zoe Power and Lucas Antics, as you can see on the right, so that's him. And we did some quite kind of straightforward animation, and they basically are very much made in the same way as Hidden Station. So let's go into that. All right. Yeah, and well, in general, as I said earlier, in terms of collaboration, before I start with that, just because I find that quite important in terms of, I mean, obviously I can talk a lot about, all these different nice projects and so on, but what I'm always quite interested in as an art practitioner myself, and as artist and filmmaker, I want to know how things can work and how they can be substantiated in a way. And that's, as I'm obviously project manager very much for arts and culture projects at Zubr, I'm always very enthused about people, either approaching me or me approaching people and trying to find different funding streams and so on, and trying to help with proposals. And I think that's something I really would like to point out, is that if people want to learn more about what we do, I'm always happy to explain things, and I'm pretty quick usually with making rough budgets and giving some sort of lead as to how, some sort of like idea as to how things can be done and what sort of different techniques can be used and so on.
That's amazing to know, because I know myself, it just looks completely daunting.
I'm so sorry.
To approach
It should, yeah, I know.
That's great to hear from yourself, the actual company itself, to say, just get in touch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what I really want to say is that many of my colleagues, many of the people working at Zubr are creatives themselves, and we very much want to enable the local community in the Southwest, and we are, really trying to, as Amy did as well with you, where she said, we can make something work, and that's the thing. I think it's really, really important to understand that no matter how daunting something looks like in the first place, I don't know, I'm always super happy to break things down and answer all questions, and I'm usually very up for just creating whole budgets very quickly and stuff, and just giving some sort of idea. So yeah, all right. Okay, so a few points. So with Hidden Station, the brief was to create a AR experience for Bridgwater railway station, and we were commissioned by Seed Sedgemoor, and we're working with Sevenside Community Rail Partnership and with the station operators, Great Western Railways. And so the idea was to create an AR experience that is easily accessible, intergenerational, that involves people who may not engage with arts in the first place so much. That's very much Seed's objective in many ways, which I very much respect. That's wonderful. And yeah, and I think, well, obviously it was very much about finding some sort of like bold and colorful way of bringing something to life. So we had this very beautiful, wonderful idea of asking Dave McMillan and Jake Perkin, who we know, if they wanted to collaborate with us. So it was actually us basically in the first place saying, hey, we would like to come up with a proposal for this wonderful call out. So we got in touch with David J. They said, yeah, absolutely. And, we started writing our application and here we are. So it was really lovely to get that in because it's such a beautiful example of co-creation and working with communities. What I really liked about this is that David and Jay went to Bridgwater, into different places to meet up with local residents and collect stories. So they identified 4 key themes, and they called them hidden festivities, hidden history, hidden rebellion, and hidden adventures, to feature local history of all sorts, to kind of strengthen kind of the sense of place, I would say. And what we've done with them was similar to the process with Tomasin. So you would, when you work with an illustrator, you would get these files either as either drawn as they are, or you would have digital. Well, it could be either. It could be digital files. It could be something that is then photographed and so on. And we would basically identify certain elements within the picture that we can work with and could animate. In this case, we've done filters. So this is actually, there are 2 things. So there are filters, AR filters are basically, in this case, done via either Instagram or Facebook. So it means it's easily accessible. You don't need to download anything. It's something quick, and this works actually really well for the station, which is different from what we've done with you, because in your case, we went for a full-fledged application, which means there is kind of more, there are more possibilities if you develop an actual application, because it means that you can have way more complex stories going on. You can have heavier, larger files. You can have a menu and so on, and all sorts of things. But in this case, in the case of Hidden Station at the Bridgwater railway station, we wanted to make sure that it's like something people can launch really quickly, because we knew that people wouldn't dwell in a station for too long. You come in, you wait for your train, and then you go again. And it was also not really too important to have a very cohesive story as such in terms of developing an app, because the cohesion came from having these illustrations and having Dave and Jake making these visually very cohesive pieces anyway. And then as you enter the station on multiple locations on multiple days, you could just try different things in a very light manner, which is lovely. So let me see if I forgot anything.
Well, I had really excited because I've not actually visited Bridgwater Station until recently. This project took me to the station, and then coming to visit you in Bristol, I got the train just to sort of cement the adventure of going on the train and trying these out. It was just awesome and basically it was my first real experience of sort of AR as well.
That's great.
I'm not sure if it's something that, I don't know, it's the kind of thing that I do find, do I have the time to try and engage with these things? But I found it so simple to sort of just use the QR code, and there it was. It would take no time at all. It was just bang.
Yeah, and what I really loved at the launch event was that it was so many various people trying it. I mean, there was a big part was older generations where I wasn't sure, we just wanted to make sure it's very accessible. So it kind of started in first place with having these engagement kind of, groups, or having these co-creation workshops. And it was not the easiest thing to try, kind of draw people in and communicate with you. So we had to try different locations. We did multiple kind of Dave and Jade came down again, and in the end it was very successful, but it took a while because obviously as soon as you come in as an artist into a community that you don't really know and you're not local, you need to find these networks and you need to kind of do research and it's kind of trial and error. And kind of like, kind of something that develops more or less in terms of gaining trust and so on. I mean, luckily these two, they are such real people. It was very easy for them to, kind of collect stories and so on.
I love that you did that as well, that you actually, I know the project could have been just nice artwork that was AR, and it was just an attraction to take to the station. But
it was so important to have this, to not just come in, and that was part of what I wrote into our application as well. I very much pointed out that we know that we come in from being Bristol-based, but we want to do something for you.
Yeah.
And we want you to tell us the stories. We don't come with stories, you have the stories already.
So that's probably had that in the past, like the ships would come in, people from Bristol potentially, and they would come in and heard these stories and share these stories, and it's a kind of that kind of area where you're still keeping that going. Brilliant.
Absolutely, and it's really lovely. I mean, we had a local storyteller coming to the event, Sharon Checksties, who was very much engaging with Dave on that launch event as well. And it's just so beautiful to see what you can do when you work with people in, kind of like foster the awareness for where you live and making sure that, everyone values these places, basically. And just to kind of go a little bit more also into how this was done. So here you can see how this program looks like. So I had on the slide earlier, so it mentioned MetaSpark. It was previously called Spark AR, owned by Meta. It's a software that is free to use, and the way these filters are made is actually way easier than apps, because an app needs to be developed by a developer who obviously does a lot of coding, whereas these filters, with a little bit of practice, a few days, can be done by artists as well. I mean, I can easily do that. And, it's basically having different things that you cut out and put into space, and you can easily kind of trial it and put it on your phone and stuff like that. So I think it's very accessible because it's free and you don't have to code. So that's quite nice.
I don't know. I have had a go. I mean,
and also, if you want to know more, please get in touch, and I'm more than happy to, pass on some hits and some leads and stuff.
I might take you up on that, because I have downloaded MetaSpark, and I don't think it's easy to use. It's like numbers and scary things.
Oh okay, sorry. You may be right. I mean, it depends on how much you're used to using and using things like animation programs and so on. Obviously, it's not easy for somebody who's never done anything like that before, but it's not impossible. It's way more understandable because it works visually. It's not like typing things in there we don't understand in the first place. So, and at least it's more accessible in terms of working with somebody doing it, and it's also, honestly, it's way cheaper as well. So I mean, there are lots of different reasons for going that way. That's another picture of that. But also, I think we should do demos now, because that was a lot of talking. I brought in, so obviously we've got Minny Stynker, which will be the highlight of this evening, absolutely. I also brought in making a scene. So for anyone who would like to try this theatre workshop tool, and theatre workshop, very much learning application, I can talk you through that. And we can try hidden station as well. So we've got these two posters here, so we can do that. Which is accessible via our phones. So anyone who's got Instagram on their phones, I can lead you to Seed Sedgemoor's Instagram. And then I've got a little iPad with a heritage app called Benaki that I can also show you, because it shows lots of different ways of making AR in terms of 3D modeling, but also scanning real objects and having pictures that would move and sound effects and all sorts of things. I think that's all. I think.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you, Simone and Tomasin. That was just mind-blowing. Just the stories and the work that Zubr are doing. Yeah, I'm really excited just to delve into this world that, yeah, for me, I've just not really had the opportunity to do so. And yeah, it's just fantastic what you're doing there. I don't know what we want to do. We can split into groups, and half of us can go with you, and half with Tomasin. We can have a look at have a go at those things there. Is that good?
That's cool.
To everyone online, apologies that you can't actually interact with these things here in person, but if you can get to Bridgwater Station, you can see these posters for yourself. And remember, yes, go on to the Zubr website and you can have access and see the fantastic projects they're working on. And then I'm sure it won't be long until Tomasin's book is out in the public.
Fingers crossed.
Right, all please come up and have a go at these wonderful things.
I just realised that if you've got pens in your book,